Welcome to the Champion Circle. Once again, we're here to showcase and highlight amazing individuals from our community. And we're grateful to Liga de Justicia Abogados, Liga de Justicia Foundation, and to all the viewers that have been able to see all of those extraordinary people that are change makers, that are doing special things in our community, that are bringing grains of sand to an amazing beach and making a difference every day. Today, we are equally blessed to have another amazing individual here, someone who I consider a friend, someone who inspires me, someone who leads our community in selfless ways and tries to make a difference every day. And that's none other than Pilar Moya. Thank you, Pilar, for being here with us today.
Amigo, it's an honor to be here with you and to all of those that are listening and watching us. Thank you.
Thank you, Pilar. So I'm fortunate enough to, in my circles, I meet amazing people every day. And I interact with people who are specialists in different areas that are joining me to help make a difference. And so today, Pilar is here to tell her story, to talk about her journey so that she can inspire those of you that are watching this podcast, and so that you can see that just like us, you too can make a difference. So Pilar, I'm going to ask you to start in the beginning. Tell us about your childhood, where you're from, where you were born, and what your youth was like.
Oh, absolutely. Happy to share. So I was born in Lima, Peru. And I got to tell you, I was the daughter of Jaime Moya, who is a dentist, and Eduardo Grande, who was a college math teacher. Both of my parents were the first generation that actually graduated from college. My grandparents had migrated to Lima, Peru from the highlands, from the city of Fortuna. So my parents were, first generation, born in the capital, and then I was second generation. Mm-hmm. Growing up as a child, I was very blessed, was able to attend Catholic school throughout all my life. I was lucky enough that I took English courses since I was 5. And I got to tell you, it was a good childhood, good school years.
Awesome. Did you celebrate your culture when you were in Peru? What do you remember about your childhood that you could say grounded you in your cultural and ethnic pride of being Peruvian?
Growing up, I celebrated more the holidays of the city of Fortuna, of the highlands, because we were so close to my grandparents and my parents also. Most of their friends were also the children of immigrants or immigrants themselves from the highlands. So what we celebrated the most was the holidays of the Huancayo, the Orcotuna, which some of the holidays were, for example, que celebrábamos el Día de la Virgen de Cocharcas. We celebrated with good music. We also celebrated with what they call it, it's like a dance around the tree, mm-hmm. Dancing around the tree, and also celebrating harvest time. Okay. So all my celebrations were based on the farms and the highlands.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And the highlands are how far out of the capital area? Like how many miles or how many hours away?
Right.
Or kilometers, yeah.
Okay, so now I feel very ignorant because I don't remember because I was a child, but right. I can tell you, we used to drive and we will drive up the mountains. Mm-hmm, and mm-hmm. It was a 7-hour drive from my home all the way to the mountain where we were from.
And I'm assuming the climates were colder, right? Because you're going to elevated areas,
absolutely.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the even the clothing and everything was different than being in the city.
Exactly, and also the breathing. Right? Because it gets a little tight, as you go up the latitude. So, I always, as a kid, I traveled to Orcotuna at least 2 to 3 times a year. So I consider myself that I lived in two worlds, my Orcotuna background, my indigenous, right? My indigenous background and coming from a family of farmers that, I take a lot of pride of.
Interesting. So in some Latin American cultures, the indigenous blood is not celebrated. But in Peru, you're telling me that it was a sense of pride and a sense of celebration. And in your family in particular, you made sure to always kind of go back to your roots.
Always, every year we went back. Not only we went back, but also at home we were listening to the huaynos, which is our folklore music. And we just took a lot of pride of it. Now, it was a whole different world growing up in Lima. I gotta say, I was a privileged kid. So I grew up with kids that really didn't look like me, lighter skinned kids. And it was there was a contrast, right? Like I was blessed enough that to be in a certain, upper middle class, if not middle class back then, with many kids, with families that were much wealthier than my own. But then I always went back to the mountains,
Beautiful.
And that was a whole different reality there.
Right. That's a beautiful grounding of your culture, a grounding of your pride and your background, something that not all cultures celebrate. So as you became a teenager, things were changing in Peru, right?
Yes.
What was happening? Talk to us about that.
So it is very unfortunately that we went through a very severe recession that resulted in what it's called hyperinflation. And for those who don't know, hyperinflation pretty much means that if an item costs, let's say $1, with hyperinflation, it wouldn't go up to $100. It will go up to $1,000. So that's what, unfortunately, with the economic downturn, with the inflation, with the unfortunate corruption in the Peruvian government, and the elimination of the middle class, right? And then, you see that split of those who have too much and those who have very little. Unfortunately, that created almost like a civil war at home in Peru. And that also brought up terrorism.
Okay. So how did it affect you personally? Talk to us about
So during the 80s, there was a communist terrorist group called the Shining Path, El Sendero Luminoso en español, the Shining Path. And the Shining Path pretty much was, there were terrorists who unfortunately recruited college students. Very, poor college students. And pretty much what they did is that they terrorized the entire Lima, and, they put bombs in vehicles, in police stations, in colleges, in schools, everywhere. So unfortunately, there was a lot of crime, there was a lot of terrorism, a lot of bombs, and along with that, many businesses not only lost business, but then you have terrorists all over the place asking a business for an extra, some money in lieu of protection.
Right.
So, yeah. Mm-hmm. How did it affect me? Unfortunately, my mother's vehicles, thank God she was not in the vehicle, but a vehicle that was parked next to my mother's vehicle was a car bump and it exploded. It's a matter of minutes that my mom will have been in that vehicle.
Wow.
And that was a bump at the Lima airport.
Wow. So by the grace of God, your mother was not affected, but it was traumatic experience for you and your family.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, at a very young age, to experience that your mother could have been gone. And at the same time, my father was a dentist. He had his own practice. And during these times, when people can hardly buy food, they don't go to the dentist. Back in the days in Peru, you didn't have health insurance, so you will have to pay out of pocket to see a dentist. And not only that, unfortunately, almost daily, people will go after my father and steal his money, make threats. So total chaos and total fear in my family. Every time my father went to work, I was always concerned, is he going to come back?
Right. So now that takes your family to a place where they make a decision about you, and you make a decision together as a family to do what?
So it was very unfortunate that, being that my mother was a college teacher, she was not getting a salary anymore, and my father, total reduction of income. At the time, I was going to perhaps the best business university in Lima, and my parents found themselves that they could no longer afford it. They were concerned about sending me to a public college back then because there was always bombings at the colleges. So my parents had made the decision to send me here to New York to live with my godmother, who is my mother's sister.
So your godmother was obviously willing to take care of you, but I would imagine that it probably broke their heart, right, to separate from you during that time. But they felt it was in your best interest academically and for safety reasons, right?
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. So when you and your family made that decision, how did that make you feel? Were you excited? Were you nervous? Were you scared? Talk to us about how you felt at that time.
So that feeling, I am one of 4 children. Okay, for me, I was scared and I really didn't want to travel.
Okay.
I felt that if, I had an older brother who at the time was going to medical school and my younger brother and sister who were in Catholic school, and I felt that, come on, let me stay. Do I really need to go?
Right.
But the decision, unfortunately, the decision was made for me.
Right. And it changed your life.
Absolutely.
Now, were you the only one that decision was made for? Or?
Yes, I was the only one.
Okay, so the rest of your siblings stayed back.
Correct.
Okay. So now fast forward, you get ready, you migrate, you get to your godmother's home. Talk to us about what your first experience of the United States was. How were you feeling? What were you planning to do? How were you planning to pursue your academic career, et cetera, et cetera?
I had never thought that I would be in a position that I had to withdraw from college. I had always been very career-oriented. So when I arrived here to New York that year, I think the day after I arrived, I took the train and went to the CUNY, the City University of New York admission center, just to apply.
Okay.
But let me share something else. Growing up, like I said, my family did so well that I actually had vacation in New York prior.
So you had been here before?
I had been here before.
All right.
Yeah, back
so
in
it wasn't
1980.
A shock. It wasn't a shock.
Oh, no, not at all.
Had you been on the trains before?
Yeah, I was.
Okay,
yeah.
so I was going to ask you exactly, was it a shock to go on the subway? Were you scared or intimidated? But because you had been here before, you were not.
Oh, I was there were times that I was very scared because you know how the subway was back in the 80s, right? Like you knew when you needed to run, what car to take, or take the front, the middle, the back, scary. But I knew it wasn't new to me.
Okay.
It was not.
Okay.
So I found my way.
So the day after, you're already at CUNY, you're ready to apply.
Yes.
What happens? Talk to us about
it. It was explained to me that unfortunately I couldn't go to college, straight, that I needed to first take ESL courses. Mm-hmm. So I registered at La Guardia Community College for their English language ESL program as a full-time student there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did that go?
Actually, it went very well since I had already studied English while I was in Peru. For me, it was just a matter of months. So I guess after 2 quarters,
Okay.
or maybe after 2 quarters, I took what they call the TOEFL exam. So and I passed it with good scores, so I was able to register at La Guardia Community College and take regular credits.
Okay.
But it was with a lot of struggle, though. But hey, yeah.
When you say a lot of struggle, what do you mean?
I was so blessed that when I arrived here, my godmother, who I always call Tia Rosa, she made sure that she provided a roof over my head and food. And that was the extent. Everything else, she wanted me to be able to get it on my own. It was hard for me to understand because coming from a family where everything was given to me and now all of a sudden I don't have anything, arriving in the winter with my Peruvian jeans that were so thin or only with a pair of sneakers with holes and you'll get during the snow. The snows of the late 80s. Those were real snows. So, I really had to find a job right away, and sure enough, I found a job working at the laundromat near me, just a 1 day a week, and I used to work from 8 o'clock in the morning. No, I'm sorry, I'm lying. From 6 o'clock in the morning until they close at 6 or 8 o'clock at night.
Wow.
That was the only job I had at the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you were able to balance your grades, your school, and balance your work without a problem?
I was able to balance it. When I was at the community college, to me, it was very easy. I think what was more difficult to me was that, I wanted it to get more jobs. I really needed more income. And back in the day, tuition to me was so unaffordable. So every dime, every nickel and dime I made, I had to put aside to be able to pay for tuition. And that left me only with enough money to buy the token to get on the train back and forth on a good day. On a bad week, I would just walk, and it will be like an hour walk from my house to La Guardia Community College in the winter sometimes because I couldn't afford it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, I think I read somewhere where you said that there were restrictions on whether or not you could work.
Yes, because I was blessed enough that my aunt and Tia Rosa and Tio Raul, they sponsored me for a student's visa while I was in college.
Right.
So at the first couple of years, they were restrictions, so I really couldn't work, I did some, off the books, what you will call jobs, right? So that's, and my income I was making bare minimum.
Right. Now, to me, that doesn't seem logical, right? So now as a student, someone comes here to obviously pursue higher education, but they need to obviously pay for their expenses, their living expenses, and to not allow someone to work while having a student visa doesn't make any sense. Do you know if that is still the policy with student visas?
As of right now, I don't know what the policy is, but this is decades ago.
Right.
As I was completing my associate's degree, I was invited to do an internship at a financial corporation in the city of Manhattan. And my supervisor, she was just mesmerized with my job and my productivity. So they actually end up sponsoring me for a visa and a work permit. I don't know if that is allowed now, but back in the day, through my job, I was able to do it.
Right. So it sounds like you've been very blessed in your life, right? You had your godmother who was able to kind of help you, but at the same time, develop a self-reliance and an independence and a strength within you. You had some part-time jobs here and there to help you make ends meet, and then eventually, because of your work ethic, you get sponsored for a work visa that allows you to start making money. So talk to us about how did you finish your academic pursuits?
So, during LaGuardia, I work at this, like I said, a laundromat. Then through a cousin, I was able to get some cleaning jobs, also cash jobs. So I was cleaning apartments in the Upper West Side, working in Manhattan, and seeing how well I was doing, I figured it was time for me to now move to the next chapter, which would be my bachelor's degree. I was accepted to Baruch College. So I had a job, in a financial corporation, a regular 9 to 5 job, Monday through Friday. Then, and I will go to Baruch College every night, pretty much from 5:30 or 6 o'clock, sometimes until 10 o'clock at night, Monday through Thursday. So that's how I went. I made it.
And you were taking how many credits at that time? So you're working full time, and how many credits every semester?
I was taking full time. Like,
so
what is that? Like 12, 15 credits.
12, 15 credits, depending on the workload, right?
I took as many as I could per semester because I really needed it to graduate early because I really couldn't afford it. Right. And at the time, I couldn't get a loan. Back in the days, we didn't get loans.
Right.
Well, at least I didn't get a loan.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point in your life, if you would have compared Lima with New York City, what would you say were the similarities and what were the differences that you noticed as a young adult?
Well, in terms of similarities, perhaps although I was in a whole different country, living with my aunt and my uncle, they provided such a safe atmosphere for me that I almost want to say that, they're really the best thing that ever happened in my life. Back in Peru, I was one of 4 children. Here in New York, I was one of 1. My godparents couldn't have children, so I was the only one.
So you were spoiled in some ways.
In
some small
Actually,
way.
Later on in life, super spoiled.
Yes.
Absolutely, yes. Super.
Right.
Later on, after I accomplished all the goals that Tia Rosa had for me,
right.
She spoiled me too much.
Okay. But Tia Rosa wanted you to become an independent and a strong woman, right? So she wanted you to earn the things that you were getting.
She will always say, Pilar, there is always a pathway, right? In your life, we follow our own pathway, right? You want the easy pathway or the difficult pathway? And I say, what do you think is going to give you the best goal? How do you think you can accomplish your goals? You need to take the hard pathway. Things that come, easy go. Mm-hmm. So, and there were times that, I struggle, I miss my parents, oh my God, tears here, there, everywhere. And she will be, nosotros somos mujeres fuertes. We're a strong woman, we are determined, and we're going to accomplish the goals that we had in mind. Her biggest fear was for me not to become a professional. Right. Her biggest fear was that, she's going to meet somebody and she's going to get pregnant and she's going to get married and she's going to quit school. Right. Or her biggest fear was that at the time, many of the people that immigrated from Peru to Lima, many of our friends were working for families, what do you call living nannies, and they drop out of school. That was her biggest fear for me. Right.
Right. So her dream was to see you become a professional individual, and look what you are today, right? A strong professional individual, changing the world and making a difference. So you were able to graduate from Baruch, and talk to me about what the next step was.
Oh, I have to tell you something about graduation.
Okay. Yes, please do.
Right before graduation, I was invited to a Christmas party, the company Christmas party. And usually it would just be in the office, but there was a particular year, and it was around the time that I was invited to, our company party was at Tavern on the Green.
Oh, very nice.
Which is a very fancy, at Central Park.
Yes, Central Park.
So I was so afraid and scared to go because, as a matter of fact, my supervisor had invited me to go with her on her limo to the restaurant, and I say, why are we taking a vehicle? This is Manhattan. And she's like, no, this is in Central Park. And I'm like, well, so then I don't want to go because how am I going to come back? I don't have a vehicle.
Right.
And she's like, no, Pilar, you'll be able to walk to the train. I said, okay, fine. Let's go to Tavern on the Green. So, this is all new to me. Got to Tavern on the Green. As soon as you arrive there, you don't even open your doors. There's somebody else. The doorman at the restaurant opens the door for you. So as the doorman is opening the door and I'm taking my food out and I just look up, on Central Park West, you won't believe it. I saw a window and the balcony of one of the apartments that I used to clean during college.
Wow.
And an apartment that also had a young artist, and I used to babysit their babies. And I remember for those many years when those parents will go out because, on the weekends he works, he played the guitar. I will, when the baby was asleep, I will stand from the balcony and look how beautiful Central Park is. And I remember I used to look at how these people will come into this restaurant and get out of the, see the vehicles, getting them out of the, getting them out and walking into the restaurant. And many years I wondered, that must be a beautiful place. And then that day, as the door is opening and I just look up and I'm like, oh my God, this is the beautiful place.
Right.
And then I hope I don't start tearing, but the first thought that came to my mind after I saw that balcony, I just look at my hands. Because during those years that I work as a cleaning apartments, back in the days, we used these cleaning products that were very toxic. And I remember getting many rashes on my hands. And I'm like, I don't know, I had to look at my hands and I said, oh my gosh, there's no rashes. My hands are perfect. And to me that was like, damn it, I made it. If you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere.
Just like the song says.
Yeah.
So it was a sense of accomplishment, and it was almost like that moment was meant to be, right? That God wanted you to be proud of yourself. And God wanted you to recognize that you had achieved something. Even though it was just the beginning of your journey, you had already achieved greatness, and you should be proud of yourself. And I can tell you that I'm proud of you every day. So, okay. So you have that beautiful moment just before graduation with your job at Tavern on the Green. One of those really, special places in New York where, so many wealthy people go to enjoy special moments. And it's something that I can tell you as a kid that grew up in the Bronx, whenever I went to Tavern on the Green, it was a big deal, right? And I felt similar kind of, wow. It's almost like you feel awe or you feel a sense of, this is special, right? So that's beautiful. So talk to me about graduation and what you decided to do after graduation.
So I graduated Baruch College by the grace of the Lord because working a full-time job and then still cleaning apartments on the weekends and going to school full-time was very challenging. And at the time, I was also dating my husband. So I ended up getting married, and then I graduated. After I graduated and we were married, we decided to purchase our own home. I was able to get an excellent job in the city. I had a job in the city for many, many, many years, doing extremely well. And my husband and I were able to purchase our first home here on Long Island.
Okay. So before you purchased a home, up until that point, you were living in Queens, correct?
Yes, we were living in Queens, in College Point.
So and before that, when you were living with Tia Rosa, you were living in what part of Queens?
I was in Elmhurst, but right on the border of Jackson Heights. So I almost want to say Jackson Heights because you can take the girl out of Jackson Heights, but not the Heights out of the girl.
There you go.
And I still go back.
Right.
I got to go back.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So us city folks, we love to always reflect on our time in the city because it builds
yes.
character and it makes us strong, right?
Absolutely. Roosevelt Avenue in Queens,
course.
like from the 60th Street and 70th Street. Oh, that's the Irish. 70th Street to 80th Street, that's the Hindu.
Right.
80th Street to 90th Street, Colombians.
Right.
Then 90th Street, Dominicans. And then, the thing was like, which PS you went to?
Right.
Because I didn't, at the time that I came to visit, I actually went to public school here, which I love that experience as well. Yeah.
So now you mentioned, right? So in the city, we have the fortunate part of having diversity.
Oh, yes.
It's a beautiful, diverse kind of mosaic of different cultures and backgrounds and ethnicities. And we have it. Sometimes it's kind of segmented, as you said. Other times it's kind of, very mixed, no matter what area you're in. But you moved to a town of, what is it, Dix Hills?
Dix Hills.
So Dix Hills, I would imagine at that time.
The border.
The border of Dix Hills. I would imagine that you were probably one of the first Latino families to move into that area. Talk to us about that experience. How was that move? Was it culture shock for you? Was it culture shock for your neighbors? What were the good and bad things that kind of came about with that move?
So I gotta tell you, I was pregnant. I was 4 months pregnant when we moved here to Dix Hills. I was so determined to give my children the best education possible, and also on the many jobs that I did on the side. Years ago, I used to babysit kids who live in Dix Hills. When my boss at the time realized how smart I am, I became the kids' tutor. And reading the materials, I became very impressed with the district. So I said one day when I have my own kids, I want my kids to go to Half-Moon Hills. So I strategically purchased in the border because I couldn't afford the rest of Dix Hills, right? Right on the border. And, that was a dream come true for me. It's my first home. I am pregnant. I'm going to raise my children here. Right? And I'm going to give them the best education I can possibly get.
Right.
I was extremely happy until the second day after we moved.
Okay. All right.
We moved, and the second day we received a hate note. It was a series of 3 notes that we received consecutives. A first note saying that we didn't belong here, we needed to move out, and we needed to sell the house immediately. I ignored it. Then we received a second note that says that if we didn't move, they were going to burn down my house. I ignored it. To be honest, I couldn't believe it because in my heart, first of all, I'm a mom.
Right.
I'm carrying a baby.
Right.
And I'm a heavy girl. So, people thought I was expecting twins when I was only expecting a child. So, especially in the winter, like whoever wrote those notes, they saw me entering my home in and out. I was humongous. So they knew very well I was pregnant.
Right. And had no compassion.
No compassion whatsoever. So then I ignored the second note. Then we received the third note. And the third note was that they were going to kill me and my baby. When I received that threat, it was just too much for me to bear. And I remember going to one of my neighbors, and one of the neighbors that has welcomed us. We actually moved to a cul-de-sac. And every family in the cul-de-sac welcomed us with open arms. So it was somebody, the person that sent the notes was from the other street, but my neighbor from right across from me on the cul-de-sac, he was retired, and he was actually the chief of the Dix Hills Fire Department at the time, and I panicked. So I remember knocking on his door, and I said, Larry, I really need to talk to you. And I started, crying and tears. And I didn't know he was the chief of the fire department at Dix Hills either. And I said, please, I need you to get the word out in the neighborhood. I am putting my house for sale. Please, I'm moving out. And I don't know who this person is who's writing these notes, but please get the word out. I'm moving. I'm going to put the house for sale. And I remember Larry telling me, this is your house. You bought your house, and you deserve to live in this house. I'm going to take care of it. And I'm like, in my head, I'm thinking, but what is he going to do? Little did I know, that's when I found out that he was the chief of the fire department. He had contacted the second precinct, and there were vehicles, patrol vehicles, patrolling my area and around my house, especially at night. Little did I know that there was another couple also retired in the same cul-de-sac, the name of Steve, and Steve and Larry, as we get older, we don't sleep as much. Now I'm guilty, I don't sleep much either, but Larry and Steve will take turns at night to look over my house from their windows. It's and for so many years, I was like, why will somebody hate me and my baby for the way I look? And unfortunately, for those many years, I also failed to see that, yes, people can feel that hate for you, but then there are others who don't know you either, who can love you so much that are willing to go above and beyond for your safety,
That's, it's emotional for me to even hear your story. And I'm grateful to those angels that you had in your life, right?
Yes.
Like the fire chief. Me being a volunteer firefighter, that makes me even prouder to understand that a volunteer firefighter stepped up for you in your neighborhood. He had leadership, relationships. He had the ability to have influence, and he used it positively. You had law enforcement individuals who did the right thing. You had neighbors who actually sacrificed from their own rest to kind of watch and protect you and your husband and your baby. But on the other hand, it upsets me to know that this fear of the unknown, this fear of someone different, could bring out that much hatred in this world. And unfortunately, it's going on even today, right? But for it to have happened to you when you were pregnant, where it affects you emotionally, it affects your baby, it's just so disappointing. But unfortunately, there's a history of it. There has been redlining here. And you mentioned, before we started taping today, that there were some hurdles that you had to kind of get through to even just go to closing. Talk to us about what happened at the closing.
So this happened all in 1996, right? We, recently, I was out of college probably just for a few years. So it's not, at the beginning, I wasn't making a lot of money. I had a decent salary, so did my husband. But we were able to get what it's called a Sonny Mae mortgage, a state of New York mortgage agency for first-time home buyers. And don't ask me how I made all the pieces fit in the right places. The property, the price of the house was right. Our credit was always perfect, and we always had no debt. So we were able to get the mortgage, right? I mean, my realtor also advocated a lot for me, and we were able to obtain the mortgage. But when we got to closing, we did the closing, I remember, in Smithtown. And at the time it was Chase Bank in Smithtown. And when we got to closing, the bank attorney and the loan officer or the bank person, he was like, I've never done a Sonny Mae mortgage. This is Dick Hills. And how can you get that here in Dick Hills? And I'm like, well, I got the right price. And I was already approved for a mortgage. I'm ready to close. And he's like, well, we cannot close because I've never done a Sonny Mae mortgage for first-time home buyers, for people that meet certain income guidelines. And I said, well, sir, with all due respect, if you don't know how to do your job, then it's time for you to call somebody else who knows.
Good for you.
Even my attorney was telling me, are you sure you want this house? Because with all these hurdles, and I was like, I want this house. I really want this house. I want to raise my kids here, and I want my baby to be born here.
God bless.
So we were able to overcome that, and thank God we had a closing.
Awesome. And are you
Yeah.
still in that home today?
I'm still in that home.
God bless you.
And I will never forget, after the closing, all I had left was $40 in the bank.
Okay. So you give birth to your first child, and you are working, and your husband is working. So how is life balance going with your husband, with your child? Talk to us about, what's going on in your career and what's going on in your family life.
I really enjoy my time working at the financial corporation, but at some point in my life, I realized that I really want to make a change, work in a field that perhaps I can ease somebody else's pain a little, especially immigrants or anyone that might need help. I decided to work in a law firm. I started from the bottom, move up. I was very blessed that I made enough. And I was very blessed that we were able to have, like a living nanny to care for my son. So, I was spoiled. I got to say I was spoiled. During those years, I was spoiled.
I don't think you were spoiled. You worked hard. You and your husband worked hard in order to provide a safe environment for your child, right?
Right. But what's I don't know if it's ironic, but also my aunt and my uncle, they built their own wealth and they had no children. And they chose to share a lot with me after I graduated and I got married. Right. So when I tell you I was blessed, she helps me with the down payment of my house.
Right.
I had the baby. We had no furniture in the house, and my aunt will say, mi nieto lo van a venir a visitar y no va a haber mueble acá. Like, my grandson is going to be born. Family are going to come visit you, right, and you don't even have a good piece of furniture. So right away, she took my husband, bought a beautiful bedroom set, brand new. Then she also felt that the vehicle that her grandson was going to be discharged on was not the safest. So she took my husband again, and he's like, no, you guys need to buy another vehicle. Right. And I'm like, okay, right, seriously, wait a minute. Many years ago, I needed pants, I needed snow boots, and you wouldn't get it for me. And now you're like, furniture, down payment, car. And I'm like, okay, all right. Like, it's just. But you know what? She wanted to make sure that I was going to be fully independent. She always wanted me not to have to depend on no one. And, I'm telling you, I was blessed. Right. Those years I was blessed.
Okay. Yeah. All right. But I honestly, blessings come to people who deserve them. And obviously you deserve them, right? So you're working at the firm, and then you go to the Family Service League, which I did not know before today.
Yes.
That you worked at the Family Service League. Explain to me how you got that opportunity and what you were doing.
So there's a little story right before that. When September 11 happened, I work like half a block from the Empire State Building. And that day, the fear that happened was really bad. And that day, I realized that I needed to plan my exit of New York City.
Okay.
So 3 years later, I was able, after saving enough, planning well, I decided to leave my job in the city and work here on Long Island. Also, at the time, I struggle with what is called secondary infertility. So, and when I decided to give up having children and I started the adoption process, I became pregnant. So I have 2 kids that are 21. And I gotta tell you, I had my 2 little ones, and I said, this is time. It's time to leave the city. So I quit the city. shortly after I left my job in the city, I just didn't know what to do with my time. You know me, and I loved the time with my kids, but I started to volunteer with the Family Service League in their debt counseling department, which I really enjoy. And a few months later, they actually hired me to be the supervisor of the debt counseling department. That's how that happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So the Family Service League is your first kind of like your first introduction to serving the community and making a difference in a professional way.
In a professional way, yes. Yeah. The prior years, I was always involved with the community, but usually on the weekends.
Right. As a
doing my own,
volunteer.
as volunteer with other groups
Right.
and my church.
Okay.
Very active at my
Okay.
church.
So you mentioned September 11th, and one thing that I read in your bio that I found interesting was you felt this strong sense of American kind of pride and a sense of being part of being an American and all of those things. Tell me a little bit about that.
The first time I traveled to Peru, when I went back for the very first time, right away I realized I didn't belong there anymore. The PTSD came back from all this, what I had experienced during the Shining Path years. And then, unfortunately, my parents are age, and, we didn't have that relationship. Even my siblings who I had left as children, they were now young adults, and it was different. But I could tell right away that there is a huge disconnect. That this was a place that it will always be in my heart, but I know I will never come back to it. I didn't feel like I belonged there anymore. But at the same time, living here, experiencing bias, experiencing hatred, in my head, I also felt like I don't belong here. I'm not an American, where do I belong? And that's the question that every immigrant has. Like, at some point, you feel like, where do I belong? But then September 11 happened, and that impacted me so much. I struggle. I realize how much I love my country, the United States. I realize everything that I'm willing to do for my country, which is the United States. And that's when I realized, you know what? I might not sound, I might not look like, but this is my country.
Right.
This is my country.
That's beautiful.
And I decided to become a citizen. Because, back in the days, they talk about double citizenship, and to be honest, I never believe on that. I feel that you should be a citizen of one country, just one, that you should honor, right? And for me, that's when I realized whoever likes it or not, if they don't like the way I look, the way I dress, or the way I sound, that's too bad for them. I'm an American.
Okay. So then you get introduced to housing help.
Oh, yes.
Back in 2010. You wind up with
2009 and 10, yes.
Right? You get an opportunity at Housing Help. Tell us how that happened and what you were doing.
So, if you may recall, during the Great Recession of 2008, when the real estate market totally crashed, I was working with Family Service League doing debt counseling. Many people were struggling, losing their jobs, but then also because of the real estate crash, the executive director of Housing Help learned of me, and she wanted me to do foreclosure prevention counseling for her. So I pretty much had like 2 jobs. Because of the recession, I got so involved and I started learning about foreclosure prevention. And that's when I really work with people of so many walks of life. By not only that, but I was able to provide foreclosure prevention counseling to former mutual, those stockbrokers, mutual fund managers, doctors, engineers that had a lot, and then all of a sudden they lost it. And that was quite an experience. But what I realized is that I really needed to learn more, so I constantly went back to school again to learn more about finances. But most importantly, I took a lot of classes on mental health, because I unfortunately saw at least two of my clients that, were at the risk of ending their lives. So that's how bad it was during the recession.
Right.
Some people lost it all.
Right.
And especially in the community that I was serving, the Huntington community, there were many, like middle-aged white men who were doing, house renovations, I don't know if you recall, but during that time, prior to that, the houses went up in value so much that people was getting a mortgage, like using your debit card, right? And making all these new kitchens and improving their homes. And all of these people lost business, and many lost their homes to foreclosures. And, I always felt that I needed to make sure that it's not just saving them financially, but it's also mentally and emotionally. So, yes,
I love the fact that you discussed the fact that you went and you educated yourself about mental health, right? I think it's such an important dynamic in everything that we do. In order for us to be economically solvent and successful, we need to be mentally and emotionally capable. We need to be able to have good mental health in order to be physically healthy. It really touches all aspects of our lives. And the fact that you were now in a phase in your life where you had determined that I'm a proud American. I love my country. My country is America. I'm also a proud immigrant, right? So you had that duality, right? And you're able to help non-immigrants as well as immigrants, because when I think of you, I think of this strong immigrant, focused leader, but your foundation is one of helping all people, right? So that's a beautiful thing that you were able to, during your career, assist people of all backgrounds. And it was an immigrant woman from Peru that was helping white males in the suburbs of middle class, right? And those people that perhaps were not as welcoming to you were now benefiting from your services. So tell me how that made you feel to be able to help like a diverse group of people.
Well, I was proud of being able to help such a diverse group of people, but I gotta tell you, just like everything in my life came with a lot of struggles. There were times that a white middle-aged male will walk into my office and he will say, "You gonna help me?" And I say, "Yes." "Oh no, I don't work with immigrants." I'm like, there's gotta be someplace else. And I said, "Sir, you're welcome to stay or you're welcome to leave. But I can tell you one thing. There's no one like me that is going to be able to do this job for you."
That's right.
With the love that I do it, with the dedication and the time.
That's right.
And there was one time that a woman came in and she left. She couldn't find anybody else, and she ended up coming back.
With her tail between her legs, I hope.
Because there was just one Pilar that at the time knew how to handle all types of loans and debts while also knowing foreclosure prevention. At the time, when you are in the middle of a recession, new programs coming up, unless you have someone that is constantly reading and studying and learning, there's no way. There was no such a thing. If you went to a lawyer, the lawyer will do a bankruptcy. If you went to a credit counseling, they will just do a credit card consolidation. There was no one that will able to say, "Let's do a financial analysis. Let's discuss what are the pros of the cons of credit card consolidation, debt management, perhaps another loan, perhaps a short sale." There was no one that was prepared for it.
Right. No one but you.
At the time, it was, yeah.
Right? You were one of the few. And I'm sure you were humble and gracious enough to help that woman, right?
Of course. I will never, let me tell you, my policy has always been, if they make it through my door, I will help them. Because even back then, and you know this from working in the not-for-profit world, we are overworked and underpaid, right? That's we do it for the love that we have for our community, right? And not only that, but also I remember there were times that I could only clock in for 20 hours or 30 hours or 40 hours, and I remember working twice as many hours, and I wouldn't clock in. But I had to do it.
Right.
Because if somebody needed the help, I'm telling you, if they came through my doors, they will get the help.
Right. And that's where our community benefits from your amazing efforts and from your amazing service. So now fast forward to you get the executive director position at Housing Help. So tell me how that happened, and then talk to me about the great things that Housing Help is doing today.
So the former executive director, Susan Lackville, she saw in me something that I didn't see. She really, from the beginning, once she announced that she was going to retire, she wanted me to be the executive director. And I was very reluctant at the beginning. So they started the interviewing process. They really couldn't find anybody. And it was getting to the point that, we are jeopardizing the existence of Tiny But Mighty Housing Help Inc. And I said, no, I'm going to step it up. I'll become the executive director. So to me, it was, again, a very huge learning experience. I have had a lot of management experience from my job in the city. I got the finance experience, but not the running of a nonprofit. So it was a huge learning process. When I took over Housing Help was actually the pioneer not-for-profit to try to build multifamily affordable housing pretty much in a white neighborhood. Housing Help was on that fight for over 30 years.
Right.
As a matter of fact, because at the time...
Over several presidential administrations.
Exactly. Right. And because the town wouldn't give us the variance, right? The Housing Help, together with the NAACP, we end up suing the town, suing the state, and decades went by. I inherited the project of Maternal Court. I had no development experience, but I was determined to bring it to fruition. And by the grace of God and the support of the amazing team of Housing Help and all the volunteers.
And all the partners and collaborators.
All our partners and collaborators, we were able to pretty much bring it to fruition. We are, after 40 plus years now, Maternal Court is being built. We're hoping to complete construction by the end of this year. And for the first time, we're going to have, not for the first time, but not common here on Long Island, because let's admit Long Island is, especially when it comes to housing, is highly segregated, right? But building affordable housing in a white neighborhood, really, that was a huge accomplishment. Many thought that we will never bring it to fruition, but we are. When I took over Housing Help, it was a tiny but mighty nonprofit with a total operating budget of maybe $100,000. Now it's close to $1 million.
Congratulations.
Yes, so we're growing.
And how many families is that development going to impact?
That development is going to impact 146 families, and eight of the units are going to be for people who intellectual and developmental disabilities. Some are going to go for veterans. And the rest is open. It's affordable, so those who are income qualified.
Right. Plus, I'm sure it's impacting the economy of the local area. It's creating jobs. So the impact that you have, you can't even comprehend. That Housing Help and under your leadership is going to have is going to change the world in that town and in Long Island.
And also that we are going to be able to prove that we can build multifamily housing and at the same time being conscious of our beautiful environment and our beautiful world. We can build green multifamily housing on Long Island. We don't have to ruin the environment.
Right.
We need to love our planet. And Matanaco Court, which is the name of a development, is an environmentally friendly.
Awesome. So tell us, I'm assuming that most people know, but Housing Help is a 501c3, right?
Yes.
Not for profit. It's always welcoming donations. Monetary donations are always accepted by our not-for-profits. But tell us a little bit about what other areas of assistance Housing Help would welcome help in.
Well, we're always looking for someone that may want to volunteer their time. We have one of the programs that we run is the Tenant Resource and Information Program. Every year we get close to 3,000 families that reach out to us desperately looking for affordable rentals, which unfortunately is almost non-existent. So what we do is that we compile master lists twice a week of available rentals. We also compile lists of lotteries for affordable housing for Section 8, information on tenants' rights, information on fair housing, a lot of information on illegal evictions, which unfortunately many people in our community are victims of. Through that program, it's pretty much, it's run pretty much by volunteers. And I mean, we always welcome someone that is willing to go through various websites and help us put together that master list. Through that program, we serve thousands of families on Long Island. And many are very grateful for it, but it's very unfortunately that the majority of our tenants cannot afford it,
Right.
The current rental costs.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. What other projects do you have going on right now that you'd like to tell our viewers about through Housing Help?
So right now we're putting a lot of our efforts on foreclosure prevention counseling. Actually, through a FOIL request that I did through the New York State Department of Finance. Currently, Suffolk County has the highest numbers of pre-foreclosures in the entire state of New York.
Really?
Yep.
Interesting.
Yes, and not like I want to sound the alarm, but you know me, I'm a doer. So, I already wrote my letters to the senators, the assembly members. I was also able to identify the zip codes and the areas with the highest numbers. And it happens to be areas where most Latinos live, right? Brentwood, Central Islip, and Bayshore, Huntington Station, and Shirley, and Patchogue, West Babylon, and Wyandotte. But right now we're putting a lot of our focus on foreclosure prevention counseling. I gotta say, the HUD certified counselors, they are all bilingual. We have counselors that speak English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole and French. So we're putting a lot of effort on that right now because we are afraid that, back in 2009 and 2010, when we have the real estate meltdown, unfortunately, many of the homeowners in low-income communities were victims of foreclosure rescue scams, loan modification scams, and deed theft scams. We already start seeing it. So we are very focused on trying to prevent it. So we strategically now have an office in the Huntington area, one in Central Islip at Toro Law School, and recently we opened one in the Riverhead area to serve the East End community.
Yeah, congratulations. I saw that about Central Islip and Riverhead. So your expansion is impressive and it's much appreciated. So how can our viewers learn about Housing Help? Talk to us about your website. Talk to us about social media. How can they follow you and keep informed?
So to all our viewers, I am sure that if it's either not for you, but somebody that you know is in need of housing, whether it's rental housing or if they need, they're looking to purchase their first home, please check out our website. the services that we provide, and they're all listed on our websites: foreclosure prevention, first-time home buyers, tenant resource and information, and also a financial literacy program that we have. Check out your websites, because the best thing that one can do for our brothers, sisters, and neighbors is to get the financial literacy, to get the education, so that we can prevent them from being a scam. Follow us on Facebook. We are under Housing Help Inc. INC. We are on
Instagram.
Twitter, former Twitter. We are also on Instagram and also on LinkedIn. We often have information for on affordable housing there. But in addition to that, we also do a lot of advocacy for policy changes in housing. So for those of you who are listening at us today, please follow us on social media, because every quarter there is a call to action. We need you. Like right now, I will say, contact your elected officials, bring their attention about the fact that there is a rise of pre-foreclosures in our low-income communities. We should learn from what happened in 2008, 2009, and 2010. We need to take a proactive approach rather than a reactive approach. Right now we are also advocating for the New York State Office of the Court Administration to change the location of the settlement conferences for people who are on foreclosure. Right now, those are in Riverhead. When the majority of the pre-foreclosures or foreclosures are happening in Western Suffolk, those conferences should be held in the Central Islip Court. To me, that's really, we're lacking access to justice for our homeowners. That is very wrong, in my opinion. So right now we have an action, we are asking the Office of the Court Administration to change their settlement conferences to Central Islip. We were told that there is not enough funding, there is not enough space, and I said, okay, that's fine. But during COVID, courts heard cases through phone conferencing or video conferencing. So that infrastructure is already in place. Why not using it now?
And what was the answer?
I'm waiting to hear. A letter has been sent, and all the elected officials have been made aware.
Right. So thank you for your advocacy. I know that you go to Albany. I know you're at rallies on a regular basis. I know that you are calling others to help and to make phone calls and to write letters and to put pressure on. And all of those things are so needed and so necessary. Last few words. What would you tell our audience about, housing help and well, first of all, what's the website?
www.housinghelpinc.org.
Okay, .org. So what would you tell the future plans for housing help? What do you see housing help doing in 2 or 4 years from now? And talk to our audience about how they can help you.
Whenever we have our online fundraising, please, if you are able to, please, give us a contribution. As you are aware, unfortunately, much of the funding for nonprofits is up in the air with the current changes in government. And I gotta tell you, the service that we provide, it's high quality service. On financial literacy, we actually wrote our own curriculum for financial literacy for new Americans, which is financial literacy for immigrants. We serve 1,000 students per year. With our tenant resource and information, close to 3,000, sometimes over. Foreclosure prevention. We prevent foreclosures of over $40 million on mortgages. And first-time home buyers, our clients that come to us, not only do they get the counseling and get the certificate, we work with them to apply for various down payment assistance programs. So our next chapter for housing help is that my goal right now is for housing help to become self-sustainable. And I gotta tell you, how difficult that is for a non-for-profit. And it's gonna happen for us. By my next chapter is for us to be able to to develop a small mixed-use building where we could have apartments on the second floor and have our offices on the first floor in Riverhead.
I love it.
And would love to have the same in the town of Islip, so that each site of Housing Help will be able to collect rent every month that will help us sustain those buildings. I want my legacy to be the Housing Help will never die. We're tiny but mighty, and my goal is to make us as self-sustainable as possible, and we are very well positioned to accomplish that.
You are extremely well positioned, and it's largely because of you. And we consider you here at the Champion Circle a true champion. You are part of our chosen family. So some closing words, Pilar. I want you to talk to young ladies, young men, old men like me out there that are viewing this podcast today. What words of advice would you give them about your journey and about life and how they can be accomplished and make a difference?
I guess my last words will be persevere, persevere, and persevere. In the life, we're going to always find challenges. It's impossible not to find those challenges. But we really need to have our mind, set our goals, and always have those goals in front of you, right? And don't let anybody put you down or make you feel that you don't belong. If somebody doesn't invite you at the table, you pull the chair. And you get on that table and you talk and you speak your mind, because you have the right to be sitting at the table as well as anybody else. So don't let anybody put you down. Don't let nobody discourage you. Once you have your goals set in mind, work towards those goals and understand that those challenges, there can be difficult, but once you overcome one challenge at a time, that will only make you more and more powerful. And you're going to reach a point that you build so much thick skin, nothing will take you down.
Amen. You are a proud American. You're a proud immigrant.
A proud immigrant.
You're a proud immigrant. And you're someone that inspires me. And I'm sure you're going to inspire so many in our podcast. And every day of your life and your journey, you've impacted and inspired many, many others. So we thank you for being on the Champion Circle. As I mentioned, we consider you a champion. We consider you part of our chosen family. On behalf of Liga de Justicia Abogados, on behalf of the Liga de Justicia Foundation, we thank you for everything that you do. We tell you that we are collaborators and partners with you for life. I have your back whenever you need me. I can tell you that I'm proud to call you a friend and a colleague, and I'm proud of everything that you've accomplished in life with your husband, with your family, but most importantly, with our society. The difference that you make will never be able to be truly measured, but I can tell you that you've changed the world. So thank you for being here with us today.
And thank you for being you, because you motivate me as well. And that's one of the reasons why I don't drop the towel, is because there are other champions like you and many others. And we are just not going to give up, because we have to leave this world a better place for our young people.
Amen.
Thank you.
So we will continue to make the world a better place by showcasing and highlighting amazing people like Pilar and many others. So stay tuned to the Champion Circle to hear these great stories and to continue to be motivated and inspired. Stay tuned, and thanks.